Good morning and welcome to the VIP seat. Today is March 6th, and our top stories today in private aviation include how it looks like bonus depreciation is coming back, and brace yourself because the trade war has begun. Your hosts today include yours truly, Jessie Naor, and our co-host, the third time he's been back, I believe, is Preston Holland today. Preston, welcome back.
Hey, Jesse, thanks for having me. I think I was the first guest and
You
then
were?
like the 18th guest, and now I'm
Yep.
the who knows. So
You're just
super
you're just
excited to be
becoming a
here.
regular here, so it's great.
Hey, it's one of my favorite listens, so anytime I get to come be a guest, it's always
Awesome. All right, folks, sit back, buckle up, and let's take off. All right. So this week there was an article posted on privatejetcardcomparisons.com. Doug Gollin, who almost everybody in the industry knows, his site is really focused on the consumer. So he's trying to give people the pros, the cons of all the jet card programs, the fractional programs, you name it. And he posted there's apparently some legal cases involving Jet Genius Holdings, which includes Charter Flight Group, Jet Agency, Jet Charter, Jet Exchange, a bunch of different companies. A lot of back and forth on a trip that didn't happen, and the customer is suing over the funds. It looks pretty messy.
yeah. This is not great. It I think that there's more to this story than what meets on the surface. I mean, suing somebody is not cheap, but what I remind people in this industry is, look, don't mess around because you're messing with people that have more money than time. It's the whole reason that they are flying private. And if you pull some fugazis, they will come after you. There's been a couple of instances that have been relatively public in the transaction space and in the charter space where some end client felt as though they had been ripped off somewhere. And so they said, you know what, I'm going to sue you, even if they're not right, the reputational damage has been done. And so I think there's probably more to the story. Now, Jesse, you were an operator at one point. I work in aviation finance. So this is not my world. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but here's my understanding of how charter brokers work. Charter broker sits in the middle. They have a contract with the client and they have a contract with the operator, and they take a scrape out of the middle. That could be anywhere from 5 to 40% if they're, got crazy margins, right?
Mhm.
They collect the money from the customer and then they remit the payment to the operator by wire or by credit card or however that transaction happens. What would happen in this situation between the broker and the operator that would cause to not be able to refund the end client? That's what I'm trying to understand, because maybe I'm stupid in this world, but you help me understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would be surprised, and I would never do this as an operator, but there are plenty who do that will extend credit. Especially with brokers that look, if you're not the millionaire and you're just a broker in the middle, it's hard to get $100,000 charter booked on your credit card. Unless you really have already got those funds in your account. So sometimes that happens where someone extended credit because of a relationship and then things went awry or it didn't work out. I mean, there's so much that can go on. You think about international flying. If someone didn't have a passport or put the information in wrong, the trip gets canceled. And once it's booked, especially on a peak travel day, it's booked. As an operator, you try to like work with people and help them out. But technically your contract can say, nope, 100%, even if the trip didn't fly, you signed an agreement with me, you didn't give me the information that I needed, so we couldn't do the trip. I mean, there's so much nuance that can happen, but yeah, I mean, usually these things don't play out in public. You can try to find a way to like make them work. I think what you're saying too about wealthy people is true. Sometimes people will sue. They don't even care if they're actually going to get the money back. It's a principle thing. They got
Yeah,
attorneys on speed
exactly.
dial. That's
Exactly.
the risk.
Well, they've got an entire army of attorneys at their beck and call, that are looking to do something. And yeah, a lot of these folks, they got to where they are because they are principled. And so if you got some fugazi, it's like, avoid that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the worst part of this story, Doug, published this. Obviously, no one wants their dirty laundry aired out in public, but the CEO of the organization who this was about wrote some rude comments back to Doug, and Doug posted that publicly on the website. So
Yeah, it's tough.
Not the best.
It's a tough look. I learned somebody told me really early on in my career, unless you want it showing up on CNN, don't send it in a text. And even now with the whole the voice recording thing in the iPhone freaks me out because now it's like who knows if you're being recorded or not, right? At any given time on a
Mhm.
phone, right? It used to be, oh, pick up the phone if you want to say something that's, spicy or something. And
Yeah.
so, but don't put it in text. I'll say this, not safe for young children. The screenshot is not. There is some language in there. And if you are easily offended, probably skip over the screenshot because it's tough.
Yeah. But if you like the drama and the tea, it's definitely worth reading. But moral of
I
the
drink it
story,
up. I personally drink it up.
moral of the story, it's just not a good idea. And honestly, look, I've had my moments too. I accidentally wrote something to the wrong person one time and I was actually sending it to a pilot and it was not great and we had to have a conversation about that. But,
Mhm.
you know, moral of the
You
story,
ever
like hold that
You
send
ever
button.
sent, yeah, you ever sent the text to the person you're talking about? That one's really fun.
That's what I did. And I sent it, and it was a crew member on one of our charters, and that was horrible. And if he's listening out there, we had a good laugh about it later, but it was a bad moment and a lesson learned for myself.
You know what? I think that's kind of the lesson though, is if you can grow and you can learn from your mistakes, everybody's gonna make them. But if you can
Mhm.
at least move forward from them, it sounds like, I mean, according to that article, this is not the first time that it's happened over there. So I look, it's not good for our industry to have these types of players. And I have said to many folks all across the internet, look, just because someone is good at search does not, or pay per click, does not make them a good charter broker. It does not make them a good operator.
Mhm.
Those being good at those two things are not hand in hand. So vet your sources, check who you're flying with, ask them these questions up front. Hey, if I book with you and the flight doesn't go and I get a refund, are you putting yourself in jeopardy? Because at the end of the day, these people that you're flying most of the time own businesses. They understand what's going on and they know you're making money. I mean, they're not stupid, right? Everybody's got to make money. But be honest with people and upfront. And if you have a trip cancel, like, hey, look, my hard cost is X. I was charging you Y. I can refund you the difference between X and Y, but I have hard costs at X, right? Like,
Right.
and we can do a credit over time or whatever, right? But like, just be upfront and honest about it. It's better to be transparent.
Yeah. And not dig your heels in and fight sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and
Well, speaking of digging your heels in and fighting, we are in a trade war, folks. I think all of us were hoping that this was going to maybe not happen, but I think inevitably it is happening. So
we're
25%
we are
tariffs.
going we are going to war with China. They are going to pay.
And Canada, we are going to take over Canada. It's going to be the best country
This could
that
be
we've
the
ever
United.
seen. So, yeah, but an interesting twist to this. So we all knew this was going to happen, but the premier of Ontario came out. He's the leader of the Conservative Party of Ontario. He said on Tuesday, and I didn't realize that they even had the power to do anything like this. He's personally going to apply a 25% surcharge on energy exports, and he's going to consider restricting oil transfers
Hmm.
into the United States.
Is
I
that
didn't
like
realize they had that kind of power.
Is that like Greg Abbott from Texas? I don't know if he's the governor still, so that might be a totally wrong statement. Is that like Texas saying we're independent from the federal government stance? We're going to go ahead and make choices. I'll just
Yeah.
say this: left, right, center, black, white, yellow, whatever. Justin Trudeau does not seem to have a handle on what the heck's going up there above the border. And that is not a knock on what he believes politically. That is just a leadership thing. If you
Mhm.
have what's essentially a governor of a state, or maybe even lower than that, I don't know Canada that well. Sorry to my Canadian friends. Your money's fake, your tax code's weird, and I don't understand your government.
But we love you.
But we love you. How do you let somebody like that just go rogue? I mean, that is completely rogue, which could have massive implications because you have a guy in the White House that does not like to get bullied, and
Mhm.
so it could be really bad for British Columbia because of something that this other province does. It's like it's silly.
Well, also too, I mean, the workers there and the people pumping, the refineries and everything else, like that is the major supplier to the Midwest. Like if you're cutting off oil coming, there's going to be massive supply chain impacts and cost increases in the United States for that. Not to mention, their lack of revenues and everything else. So I don't know where this ends, but obviously, like we're going to be there. I don't know if it's going to be 25% on Canada and Mexico forever, but I think it's going to be something. I can't. I think Trump is honest in that he wants the manufacturing to come back, and even though he says, "Oh, it's the fentanyl and everything else," I think ultimately it's about moving business back to the United States and manufacturing back to the United States. We're not getting out of this without some cost.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, there's been an interesting trend. So I have a lot of friends who own commercial real estate down in Texas because they were kind of taking this bet over the last 7 or so years that nearshoring was going to happen, right? So it was not necessarily that we were going to get manufacturing back into the United States. It was more that manufacturing was going to leave Southeast Asia and move into Mexico because it's closer, right? And it was a lot easier to move a shirt or a whatever across the border from Mexico than it is to ship it across from China. And so you have this interesting, like there was kind of all this movement, and I would say some net positive. Then I talked to a boat manufacturer and he said, look, it's way cheaper for us to mold fiberglass in Mexico than it is in Miami, which is where all of the boats are made. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, all of these relatively high skilled jobs with a relatively solid, mark in the economy, all of those leave Miami, right? Overnight. Overnight. And it was pretty large manufacturer, but he said, look, my costs are going up, yada, yada, yada. And that may be inflationary. I don't know. I am not a trade expert nor a macroeconomist, but from the seat that I sit, which is a sometimes guest on the VIP seat, I don't see how this is not inflationary by driving the cost of goods up.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, is that net better? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's the long game. And even last night, for anyone who's watching, his speech to Congress, I mean, he basically said, like, you're going to need to hang on for a little bit. Like, this ride's going to get a little bit tougher. But the ultimate goal is to, get us in a better position from a financial perspective, from a trade perspective. But it's going to be tough to take. We've got a lot of products in aviation that are about to get a little more expensive. I mean, I'm also really wondering what happens with, aircraft orders that are across the border.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing.
Bombardier,
Yep.
Pratt.
Yeah, I did a pretty relatively deep dive on this of how much supply chain comes from Mexico and Canada when I was writing a newsletter as soon as Trump was elected. I was kind of doing a deep dive on this, and there's a lot of seat assemblies that are made in Mexico. There's a lot of fan blades that go into the engine that's made in Mexico. So even if you're gonna rehome engine manufacturing to the United States, probably a tough thing to rehome. You're then going to have, components that are coming in from Mexico that potentially are going to have tariffs. You've got finishing and all those kinds of things. I, I, I wonder kind of what the response is. I think there's been a little bit of, there's a panic is probably a strong word, but maybe not that far off, in some of the OEMs and some of the manufacturers. I did hear a really interesting take or a interesting conspiracy theory that is from a broker buddy of mine, and his bet was that we'll see Pratt and Whitney buy something in the United States because if you think about how long it would take Pratt and Whitney to stand up something, to stand up an engine manufacturing plant or stand up a finishing, whatever the line is that you can't import stuff, right? Like they may buy somebody in the US as opposed to standing it up. I think it's an interesting take. I don't know who that would be, but I think that's an interesting prediction.
Yeah. Well, and two, we'll see how this kind of pans out in terms of, finished goods versus unfinished goods, how much has to come back to the United States where they can say, okay, yeah, now you don't have to do the tariffs because you're finishing the process here. So we'll see.
Yep, exactly. I don't know. I just hope that it doesn't drive the price of Global 7500s up because I don't know if the guys paying 80 million can take a hit to go to 82 million. I mean, it's just going to be, might just put it right out of their price range.
But the light jets, I don't know. I mean,
The light
there's
jet, yeah, for sure. On a percentage basis, it's a lot different.
yeah. Well, this story is not business aviation related, but as a former acolyte of Herb Kelleher and Southwest Airlines business model. I was very disappointed to see this week. So, for the first time in 50 years, Southwest has announced mass layoffs. This used to be the gold standard of running an aviation company. And my, how the mighty have fallen. It is a completely different business than it was, even 10 years ago.
It's I think it goes to prove that eventually the best way to make $1 million is to have $1 billion and start in aviation and lose 999. I think I think it's also there's a lot of decisions that were made over it's death by a thousand cuts. I don't think that
Mhm.
there's any one thing. But you look at the technology infrastructure, you look at the relationship with the pilots not being as I mean, Herb Kelleher used to be best buddies with all of his pilots. I mean, if you ever meet some of them from those days in Dallas, I mean, one, they're all a lot of them are massively wealthy because he
Mhm.
paid them really well, and then they were able to kind of go on and do kind of the next thing. Two, they loved the company, they loved the guy leading, they loved everything about it. That
Yeah.
went away. And then you have it like it's death by a thousand cuts. And then you have a budget airline that is frankly not very budgety anymore. I recently canceled a trip because I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to have to do the whole stupid cattle call thing. Sorry. Pay the same price that I would on a major.
Right. Yeah. No, the quality has absolutely changed. They can't get new airplanes for one. Not that like you flew Southwest for the new airplanes anyway, but I mean that kills their efficiency, and their ability to expand. But yeah, I mean at this point, it's not a low cost carrier anymore. It's an expensive cattle call carrier, and I honestly take a stop sometimes just to be on a different airline. But and I'm trying to convert people now. I'm liking Spirit Airlines. I
You've
know that's a crazy thing to say.
I saw your post about it, or maybe you texted me about it, and you said, "Hey, the Spirit First Class thing isn't so bad." So for the National Aircraft Finance Association meeting, I don't know if I really want to be admitting this publicly, but here I am. I am taking your advice and I'm trying it out, and I'm going to try the Spirit First Class experience. Now, one of the big reasons is that the slots work better, right? Like Southwest had this whole thing, right, where Southwest budget airlines in general are taking these random landing slots that don't work for business travelers necessarily, right?
Mhm.
Unless, nowadays it's like you travel whenever, work whenever. But they would take the noon slot because like no one's flying in the middle of the workday. And then they take like maybe the like 5 a.m. slot. Well, Spirit's got a couple great slots for this convention that slot perfectly for me. You know, I don't know. If you sit up front and it's cushy and it's about the same price as sitting in the back on another airline, like, I don't know. I'll give everything a try once.
It's been great. I've done it a couple times now out of Fort Lauderdale. I will say the travelers on the aircraft are not your typical business travelers. It's a bunch of families, it's a bunch of like kids because the seats in the back are cheap. But I don't know. It's just such a shame to see this with Southwest. I think what happened to them was just they got so used to being the top dog, and they really dominated. I mean, they went in these airfields and just killed the competition. But then
Hmm.
again, like most people, what happens is they stopped innovating. There was nothing new. There was no like forward momentum. They just kind of got used to just being fat and happy, and that's failing now. I think it's a totally different world for them.
And God bless if you miss your check in. I was coming back from Austin recently and I forgot because, I don't know, I fly Delta and it doesn't matter when you check in. You can check in
Right.
while you're walking through security. You're like, oh yeah, whoops. Well, I accidentally forgot to check in on Southwest, and by God, I was in the D36. I was in the middle seat in the back. I was like, you know what? For the same price, I
Hmm.
think I'd rather choose my fate in the middle
Yeah.
seat as opposed to get stuck with it.
Yeah. No, it's not what it used to be. Yeah, they're laying off 1,750 workers at headquarters, shutting down multiple crew bases. It's just the beginning. Also, Elliott Investments, they've also been making a lot of noise at the board, trying to get rid of the CEO. As happens, it feels like the vultures are kind of circling at the moment, but we'll see how they do. Until Boeing can start producing more airplanes for them, I really don't know how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Every airline's hungry for airplanes though. So they're not the only airline that's looking for more airplanes.
No, no. And the business aviation world too. We got the same problem.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
manufacturing of new is more and more difficult and more expensive.
I was talking to a client 2 days ago. He's taking delivery of a new Citation M2 in the fall, but his delivery position was originally supposed to be September of last year. It's a year-long delay, and because of the strikes and all that kind of stuff. So the supply chain slash new manufacturing disruption has still not worked itself all the way out. Especially
Mhm.
you especially see this, I think, in specific models like that. The Vision Jet, I'm hearing that people are getting delayed on those for kind of different supply chain reasons. Globals are getting delayed for various reasons. It's across the board, and
Yeah.
that drives secondary markets up. Which the other thing that drives secondary markets up actually got announced the other night, and I think that that's an interesting and exciting new topic for my business specifically. It makes a lot more sense to finance your airplane when bonus depreciation is back.
And I think it's coming back. So look, I mean, this still has some, time to go, but Trump announced during his speech this week that we're bringing back 100% bonus depreciation. Well, he said expensing, which I'm assuming is, bonus depreciation. And they're going to make it retroactive to January of this year. Some people were hoping for
January 20th is what he said.
January. Yeah.
Yeah, which is,
A
I don't
strange
know
date.
why. It's a weird arbitrary date. So I
Yeah.
really hope that if you had a transaction that delayed past the 31st into the 3rd, it's really gonna suck.
Yeah. Well, people were hoping he would go back to 2024, but that wasn't
Yeah,
apparently not in the cards. But I think that's a great news. So in spite of the trade war and the drama, I think that'll be a nice punch in the arm to the industry, which we honestly will need because we're going to be having some other cost increases and things happening this year. They're going to be tough. So
yeah, exactly. I think so. So an interesting in my day-to-day job, I talk to end consumers all day, every day, and the math typically works like this. One kind of caveat: one, this is not tax advice. Please do not look to me for tax advice. And if you want to call somebody, like we can make an introduction for you. Um, the math for them works like this. I'm going to put 20% down on my airplane. In my bonus depreciation savings, I'm going to get that 20% back in cash, which means that now I'm 80% leveraged on my airplane. And then the asset's going to carry its value over the life of the loan. So my capital cost is basically interest only when you really skim it all the way down. Now, I think as we watch interest rates kind of we busted the 4% 5-year treasury a couple of days ago. SOFR is doing some interesting stuff. I think there's movement to the downside. I think this plus the movement to the downside is going to really reignite secondary transactions. Now, I don't think it's slowed down as much as, there's a lot of doom and gloom in the industry. Oh, valuations are coming all the way down, transactions are stopping. I'm not seeing that. And a lot of the people that I work with are saying, like, you know, we may not have all of the first time COVID buyers who were buying Challenger 604s for $12 million that was worth eight, but the people who actually buy are still buying.
right. Exactly. I'm really happy that we're getting that. And, we'll see how the industry works through all this. It's a weird time, if nothing else. There's pros and there's cons, and we just have to see how this is going to pan out over the next 6 months.
Yeah. I think the big winner for bonus depreciation is actually the fractionals. There's been a huge move to fractional, and with
Mhm.
owning the piece of the asset, all of a sudden the math gets a lot better for the purchase. Because
Yeah.
look, when you fly one of the big fractional providers, it's more expensive than some other ways to fly. But I think that those are definitely big winners of that announcement.
So bonus depreciation is good for us. Unfortunately, for the eVTOL industry, things are not looking good at the moment, and it continues to kind of spiral downwards. So there was an article in the Air Current this week, and I think they do really, really good eVTOL articles. By the way, Elon takes a really deep dive and like helps you
Yeah,
really understand what's happening.
she's super smart, and if you've ever met her, she's incredibly impressive. So I
Yeah.
highly suggest subscribing to the Air Current, and John Ostrow will hit you up for the sponsorship here
There
next
we
week.
go. But yeah, so okay, originally Joby said in 2021 they're going to obtain certification by 2024 and launch in 3 cities by 2025. It's 2025. Obviously, that's not happening. I think all of these manufacturers are saying to themselves, okay, yeah, obviously, US certification is a very, very long way away. It's just not happening for us. So, but what's interesting is that it seems like UAE and other Middle Eastern countries are saying, okay, come here. We'll make this the really fun, interesting place to grow your eVTOL business. So that seems like that's now the new plan, not in so many words, but basically they're, getting ready to launch services. They're getting, they're working with operators there to do things. So I find it interesting though. It's like the money seems to be drying up in the US, but the Middle East is still willing to kind of fund the party for the moment.
Yeah, if I had a dollar for everybody that I talked to that said that they had a tie to the sovereign wealth fund, I might be able to invest in the sovereign wealth fund, to be honest. But the truth is that when it comes to dry powder, and I think this is actually not exclusive to aviation. I think this is actually the entire startup landscape. Jason Calacanis was talking about how he's spending more and more time in Dubai because that's where all of the innovation's happening and that's where kind of all the new ideas are coming from. You're talking about big checks, right? You're not talking about $1 million C checks. You're talking about $500 million checks in the first round at a, multi-billion-dollar post-money valuation, right? There's a bunch
Yeah.
of words to say that they'll basically put money into any idea. And so I think that the manufacturers are seeing that. And I also think that when you think about something like eVTOL, you really need to go to where your capital source is coming from because they're going to want to see it in their backyard first over, oh, that's cool. It's over somewhere that I can't use it, right? And so I think that that's probably a key driving factor here. I think there's a lot of over promise, under deliver in the
Mhm.
eVTOL space. I think we're seeing that really play out
Yeah.
in kind of investors losing patience. I think the public's losing patience. I think the FAA is losing patience, right? Because it's, hey, we're gonna, and well, okay, now what, right? So I
Yeah.
think, that's, and money's expensive now, right? You don't have yield hungry, people writing ridiculous checks, right? Money,
Yeah.
5%.
Well, and look, I mean, people, they put a target and a goal out there and it doesn't happen, and investors go, okay, so you don't know, like you've just completely, we're questioning the whole model and the concept because you don't really have a real understanding of when it's going to happen. And I think anyone in the industry would have already told you that 5 years ago. But unfortunately, sometimes the newcomers have to learn the hard knocks of aircraft certification and FAA processing times because it's not fast. That's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, the FAA is not known for their speed. They're known for their accuracy, but
Mhm.
not for their speed. And so I think that but I mean, you think about, I always questioned the TAM size, the total addressable market size. It's like, we're going to be doing how many of these flights a year? Like that, or a day? I was like, I don't know, man. Like me personally, not really a big helicopter guy. I know you love helicopters and they're near and dear to your heart. They freak me out a little bit personally. Like the auto rotation thing versus the gliding thing. Personally, that's the balance for me, and I think that that's a lot of the general public too, right? Unfortunately, so I don't know. I wish them all the best. I hope that someday I'll be able to ride in a flying car before I die, but I'm not holding my breath.
So my theory on this, why you and so many other people are freaked out, is because every single time you watch a Hollywood blockbuster that has a helicopter in it, what happens to the helicopter?
Crashes.
Yeah. I have a real problem with this, and I think that like VAI and some other people need to be lobbying,
Yeah, guys
the movie studios.
like Fred North, right? Fred North flies a lot of movie helicopter stuff.
Yeah.
Now you want to talk about art. The art of Fred North, like filming a stunt video and his movements on the helicopter, like look him up on Instagram. I think it's at Fred North or something like that, and it
Yeah.
is absolutely lovely. Now, do I want to sit shotgun with him? Absolutely not. Like, no, thank you. I've been in a helicopter a couple of times, and I also think that the whole like the feeling of that versus like the feeling of lift versus the feeling of lift created by a wing is just an odd. It's an odd sensation that is really
That's what we
hard to
call
explain.
actual flying. That's
Not gliding
not
with an
gliding,
engine.
not laying on the air. We're beating the air into submission and we're owning it.
Exactly.
I love
Exactly.
helicopters all day long.
I do
Well,
too. I mean,
so
I've got a big couple of helicopter clients, and I am
Mhm.
stoked for what they do. Me personally, it's a little outside my.
Well, you know this, and I've been hinting at it a little bit. I guess I'll announce a little bit here, though. So I'm getting ready to launch a free safety consumer website, so people can actually look up accidents and incidents and other useful information. And I think once you dig in, you'll realize that flying in a passenger regular charter helicopter is just as safe as the other ones. I'm not going to say that about air tours. That's a little bit different. Once that comes out, people can decide for themselves and go look at the website.
That'll be helpful. And it'll be people like me that are using that and saying, aha. And then I'm going to send it to my wife when I go and am getting into a helicopter. And she's like, do I need to up the life insurance before you go do that? And it's like, no, I think you're good.
All right. Well, so our last story of the day, I'm excited about this. It's still a little bit away, but I do expect that they know their certification timeline a little better than the eVTOLs. But the HondaJet Echelon program production has begun. They have officially started manufacturing in Greensboro, North Carolina, which I'm excited about because I'm a former North Carolinian. But they're hoping for type certification in 2018 and maybe doing the first test flight next year. So that's exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's been some turnover over at HondaJet. In 2022, Mr. Fujino retired. He created the HondaJet, and then was replaced by Mr. Yamasaki. And so he came from the Honda Motors world. And this is something interesting that somebody explained to me in Japanese culture is it is tradition when there's a changing of the guard to essentially stop everything. No hiring, no firing, no strategic directions, no investment decisions, nothing. For a couple of years while the new head gets their feet under them. And I think that's a really excellent systematic way to go about transition in an organization because you hear all these CEOs that come in and like, oh yeah, we're going to make all these changes in my first 90 days, right? Presidents do the same thing. But they say, no, we're going to stop and we're going to let the new leader get comfortable so that they can then make excellent decisions after the fact. I think I had heard some rumblings from kind of industry folks that said when that turnover happened, they wondered if this program would even continue to exist because it was kind of the old guard's idea and kind of their, it was kind of birthed out as old guard. Is the new guard going to take it forward? Are they going to pivot strategy? What are they going to do? So it's really good, I think, to see them continue down the path of actually getting that aircraft certification. And I think I know a lot of clients, if the numbers that they're promising are true, which, the HondaJet turned out to be pretty darn close to what they said that it was going to be. It's going to push the envelope. That's for sure.
I think this will have major, major disruptions to the light jet market. The Phenom 300 has been the master of the market for, over a decade now, 13, 14 years at this point. If this thing goes coast to coast, that will be a serious contender for them. So I think what the interesting piece will happen here is, HondaJet doesn't have a mid-size product. They're just going to engineer the best range possible in the smallest footprint possible. So we might be dealing with a pretty intense competition in the next few years. And this is one of the first, real clean sheet designs we've seen in a long time. Interested to see what happens.
I know, I'm excited. Here's the only drawback to a light jet that goes coast to coast. For those people who are listening and they may not operate light jets, maybe they are a heavy operator only. Light jets for 4.5 hours not sound like the most comfy thing in the world. If you've ever flown on a light jet, they're very comfortable for regional hops, and they are comfortable to fly them to the edge of their range. Not sure if they're going to be that comfortable to fly beyond the edge of their range, but we'll see. I think I think having an innovative kind of call it super light jet, right? So you have midsize, the super midsize, and the heavies, right? And you have some of the gray areas in categorization. I think this creates a new gray area. It's a super light jet, right? It's not a light jet, but it's not going to have the interior of an XLS, right? Or the Ascend, which is built off of the Excel platform to the XLS to the Ascend platform. I would be curious. So just to bring up one point about fleet operators, we've not seen anybody successfully operate a Honda fleet at scale. We've seen two companies make a go at it. Neither of them, maybe three, 2.5. None of them have been able to make a go at it. Fly Exclusive now has a relatively decent concentration, but it's well diversified, right? They have multiple product lines. And so I know Leviate Air Group is kind of making a play at, they're managing about five of them. I think the next big telling thing is going to be if fleet orders really start flowing post
Hmm.
this announcement.
Hmm.
That I think is going to be a big indication of kind of what's going on with this model.
Well, I mean, as a former light jet fleet operator, I mean, I would be highly interested in this. And people there's different kinds of private jet consumers. There's the one that wants the comfort, but then there's the one where this is just utility. Like, yeah, it's expensive, but it's expensive for a reason. As long as they can get coast to coast, they may not be able to pee standing up, which is a key buying factor. And I know this from multiple conversations with people.
Yeah,
But if you're spending $5 million less and your operating cost is that substantially lower, I think it could win. And also, just from a charter perspective, it's not necessarily about comfort. It's just about getting from A to B if you're not an owner.
yeah,
So we'll have to see.
and being operationally efficient. I will say, as long as they don't put the bathroom directly behind the pilot seats, like another very popular light jet, which
Yes.
is incredibly uncomfortable. If you've ever flown on a PC-12 or a 24, like the most awkward part is giving the pilots a high five before you go pee. That is a very humbling experience. Let's just say that.
I can't tell you. I was so excited for the PC-24 when it came out, and I got on, the first airplane I could to go check things out and was excited to see it. And when I asked about the lavatory and the pilot had to, origami unfold the toilet in front of me, I was like, oh, no.
I don't need.
It's just not the same experience as a closed door rear.
Yep. It's like by the time they finish that, it's like, you know what? I actually don't need to go. It went away.
I'll make it.
it's
I'll make
it's
it.
like my 3-year-old when she'll say no peepees.
Well, who knew we'd be talking about peeing so much in this last story? But,
It
when on
is
an
the
airplane.
VIP seat.
Oh, God, no. Oh,
We
I'm
like
never
to
going to
have
live
fun
that
here.
one
We like
down
to have
now.
fun here.
All right. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end the pod on today. This is the VIP seat, apparently. It's the fastest way to get your news. Hopefully you enjoy it a little bit and have some fun with us laughing along. But we hope that you follow our email digest. We've got a weekly newsletter that comes out. So give us a like, a subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the VIP seat.